well.
Hey, hi everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the AppliedHE Exchange on the future of higher education qualifications. My name is Mandy Mott, and I'm the founder and CEO of AppliedHE. AppliedHE is the new kid on the block as an international higher education service provider that specializes in evaluation, branding, and professional networking solutions. This AppliedHE Exchange is led by Professor Judith Leming and Associate Professor Christopher Hill. Currently, both of them are also authoring a book on the topic of higher education qualifications. Thank you very much to the both of you for your help in putting this AppliedHE Exchange together, and thanks also to our speakers from Hong Kong, Australia, and Ireland. And now, without further ado, allow me to hand over to our very capable moderators, Judith Lemay and Christopher Hill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mandy. It's lovely to be here with you all, and thank you all for joining us. I'm delighted to be co-moderating this session today, focusing on the future of higher education qualifications. And I'm, as Mandy has said, Professor Judith Lammy, and I'm Managing Director of JL Education Consultants. I'm Chair of the Navitas Board of Directors, and I'm also currently Interim Pro Vice Chancellor International at the University of Bedfordshire in the UK. For most of us, I'm just going to say a few words now. For most of us, 2020 was a year like no other, and 2021 is probably moving in the same direction. The current pandemic has brought, I think, to light issues that perhaps have been overlooked for some time. The relevance and appropriateness of assessment, issues of student engagement, student mobility, and the true value and purpose of higher education. As the landscape of higher education continues to evolve, institutions will seek new pathways and responses. Collaborations, partnerships, and even mergers will be more readily entertained and entered into. The massive online pivot during the early stages of the pandemic sparked innovation and showed what is possible at pace. Students have had the opportunity to experience different types of learning and teaching. New institutions, new types of institutions have begun to emerge. Institutions that are moving away from the traditional 3 or 4 year degree. So a new context and field of operations is being created. So what does this mean for the future of higher education qualifications? Are traditional degrees going the way of the dodo? Today, we have gathered, and I'm very grateful to, a panel of experts from around the globe to discuss and debate what change might be coming and what the future, however uncertain, might hold. We will begin by asking our panel a series of questions, but during that time, please do, in the audience, please do pop any questions that you have into the chat box, and we'll pick them up a little bit later as well. Now, before we go to our panelists, I'm going to hand over to my co-moderator, Dr. Christopher Hill, who'll introduce himself and give us a brief introduction to the session topic. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Judith. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, middle of the night, wherever it is you are. My name is Chris Hill. I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Education at the British University in Dubai. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all, or there with you all, or nowhere with you all, as we define it. Looking forward very much to the conversation. Yeah, we're probably all where we've been for many, many months, but at least we're all together, sort of. So as Judith was saying, topic of this session is about the future of higher education qualifications, and so I'm sure that by the end of this, we will have fully identified the issues, we'll have outlined the key challenges, we'll have proposed valid, timely responses, and we'll completely solve the problem for everybody involved. Or I guess we'll have had a fruitful discussion about uncertainty and change that nobody understands, or probably we'll have talked about something completely different that has nothing to do with the questions, because you get a group of academics together and that tends to be the output. So the idea for this conversation really emerged with a series of conversations that Judith and I had over the last summer, where we talked about, well, life, liberty, and the future of education. We had a lot of ideas, we had a lot of interesting conversations, and we wanted to see what other people thought. So higher education, to try and frame the session, is changing, sometimes slowly, sometimes too quickly, like the past year. And what we're hoping to address with the panelists today is some of the necessary changes that have taken place and reflect on what this might mean for the future of higher education. So the past year was unplanned, and much of what's happened has been somewhere between responding to situations and full-on crisis management, where survival was really the key. And we're hoping to, as we look to see what we've learned over the past year, what may emerge, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to reflect on the very nature of higher education provision, learner expectations, sustainability, and maybe some old versus new ideas. So I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome everybody, our esteemed panel, and everybody in the audience. And I'm sure this will be a fascinating discussion. And just to reiterate, as Judith said, please do type in your questions. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can, either during or towards the end of the session. But buckle up and enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Now I'm going to ask each of our panelists to unmute themselves and to briefly introduce themselves. So Nigel, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name's Nigel Healy. I'm a professor of international higher education at the University of Limerick. And for my sins, I'm currently the provost and deputy president, which means I'm in charge of COVID policing and the response to COVID. So it's been a kind of interesting year, the last 12 months. So I've had in my previous life, I've been able to work, well, had the privilege of working in universities in Fiji, New Zealand, and the UK. So, you know, I've had a chance to see other systems as well.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Winnie?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Judith and Mandy. My name is Winnie Lee. Current role is at the City University of Hong Kong, being the secretary to the governing board of City University in Dongguan, one of the 11 cities in the Greater Bay Area. And I managed to leave the UK before the lockdown last March. And I'm not an academic, but I've been an executive for universities in the UK, Australia, and Hong Kong, and now back in Hong Kong, and previously worked in Nigeria as well.
Thank you very much, Winnie. Yes, Winnie downplays herself somewhat there. She's been a senior member of academic teams for quite some time. Google her at a certain point while you're doing this. I'm sure you already have. And Perry.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, and as Chris said, good evening or afternoon, wherever you might be in the world. So I'm a professor based at Sunway University in Malaysia. I've lived in Malaysia for the last 9 years, but similar to many of the people on the panel, a fairly eclectic background as well in Australia, Hong Kong, UK, US, etc. And the other role I have is as a member of the board of directors of the International Centre of Excellence in Tourism and Hospitality Education, an organisation I've been involved with for a long time. And so again, they're very interested in wearing that hat on the whole issue of accreditation, qualifications, and how education is going to change in those regards.
Thank you very much, Perry. So as you can see, colleagues in the audience, we've got a terrific panel, and they really do range around the globe now, but also if you add in all of the experiences they've had in the past, I think it's going to be really interesting for us to hear from them. So first question, and I'd say I'm going to start with an easy one, but I don't think any of them are very easy really. But I'll throw it out there to the panel members. 2020, as I've said, has been a challenging year, and 2021 looks like it's going to continue. We've got a global health pandemic, and then for the UK, of course, we've got EU and Brexit. How did COVID-19 change your university's approach to education? Who would like to start off with that one? Go on then, Nigel.
I'll kick off because I've literally just come straight from our Camp G, which is our COVID academic monitoring and planning group, and we meet every Wednesday morning just to basically track how the year's going and make adjustments in response to changes in public health requirements. So, I mean, like everybody, we've had to, you know, using the dreaded word pivot, we've had to make that emergency pivot to online education. And so I think for Limerick, University of Limerick, this has been particularly challenging for, I think, probably three reasons. One is that, one of the distinctive features of the university is a very strong focus on internationalization. So we have the largest Erasmus program in the Xchange program in Ireland. And our target is 40% of our undergraduates will do at least one semester overseas in an exchange. We've had to try to substitute that for either a virtual exchange where the students are enrolled in a foreign university but studying virtually, or we've had to kind of find an alternative to that placement at very short notice on campus, but still keeping that kind of international spirit. The second is that our students, everybody does a co-op placement. They're doing work-based placements as part of the study. For some, or many of our students, that's a formal requirement from the registration body, whether that's medicine, nursing, teaching, and so on. But all our students have to do it. And again, most of those outside the medical sphere have become virtual. So at the moment, our schools, all our secondary schools and primary schools are working online. And on Monday next week, our placement students will join those schools virtually in placements. And that's really been a challenge. And I think thirdly, the fact is that this is a campus-based, a very traditional campus-based university. We've got a huge Parkland campus. We're the #1 sports university in the country. People come here to be part of a university community, to take part in the sports, the social, the cultural activities. That's our kind of USP. And we haven't got that USP at the moment. So because of the shift to virtual. So it has been a big challenge. Interestingly, we've just reviewed the statistics at the meeting this morning. Our withdrawal rates are half what they were this time last year. And our pass rates are all up. So it appears that student engagement has actually improved. Now, a lot of evidence that there's pressure on student mental health that we might come on to talk about. But certainly, we're not seeing in the data evidence of student disengagement or weakening student academic performance. The grade profiles are all up, and I suspect that's partly because there's nothing else to do, and partly because the focus is much more now on continuous assessment than on formal exams. So it's less pressurized. But it's certainly been an interesting 12 months.
That's a really interesting final point, Nigel, actually, because I think a lot of us probably anecdotally have thought that student engagement and student performance in particular may have suffered quite a lot, and quite understandably, because people are obviously going through very challenging times. So it's really interesting to hear that certainly at this stage, there's that at least that positive development, albeit, as you say, with the caveat that we know that well-being, of course, has been a challenge. So it's very interesting to hear that. I mean, while we're having these discussions and panel, certainly I'll sometimes jump in if you've said something that I think is interesting. If there's something else you want to come back at to another member of the panel, then please also do say that. Don't feel as though you can't. Winnie?
Just on that note, I'm fascinated because it's not uncommon that actually student satisfaction might go up if they study online. And I wonder whether or not in Nigel's institution's experience, whether or not you have come up with any understanding or findings of what might be the positive uptick of the feedback that you have received.
Thanks for that, Winnie. So interestingly, the student survey results, which again we did review this morning, do show higher student satisfaction with the modules. I think it seems that on the positive side, because a lot of this material, they can go to the lectures and take part in lectures live, but the lectures are all available asynchronously. That gives students the chance to go back and review material over and again. I think we're also getting some feedback. We get quite a lot of qualitative feedback that students who are perhaps shy and more kind of introverted find it easier to engage in tutorials and seminars in a kind of an online environment. It's not as intimidating. And certainly one of the things I have done this last 12 months is I've taken part in a couple of Vivas. And I've found the online Viva, and not as a student, but as an examiner, but I found the online Viva to be much more engaging and much less intimidating than the kind of police interrogation you get in a small windowless room, which typically is how Vivas can sometimes take place. So I think there are positives in that, but I mean, it's clear that students are reporting, that they're missing a lot of the social engagement, the social activity, which is what is so important to them.
I suppose one thing also that's happening, and maybe we'll come on to Perry in a moment for his view on this too, but I suppose many students as well will realise and recognise the efforts that their universities and colleges and schools are going to, and I suppose we all do appreciate the scale of the challenge, don't we? Having said that, they are spending money, they're spending time, they're investing a lot in so many ways in their education and what they're doing. So, it is going to be interesting, isn't it, to see what the satisfaction levels are actually, as well as the performance level, and therefore what we can do about it. But Perry, the view from Malaysia.
Well, our situation has, unfolded very rapidly here back in March last year. And I think just to follow up on Nigel's comments, we're very campus-based. And as you can see from the large buildings behind me, but in fact, one of the wonders of being able to do these things online is I can take you to the buildings behind them very quickly, which is we're actually connected into one of Malaysia's largest shopping malls, theme parks. So again, the on-campus experience is something that's been very strong, and as a university, we've been very focused on face-to-face teaching with very little thought of ever doing anything online or even being blended, to be honest with you. So when things happened here very quickly, and they did happen very quickly, because the government basically issued a very clear edict. Now, in some ways that worked for us because we participated with our graduates in a survey in the middle of the year towards student satisfaction of online. And we, again, had no background in this, and our staff, again, went days and nights of doing what they, as best they could under the circumstances. And I think the students really appreciated that. But what was interesting was that survey showed that we actually had higher satisfaction than students had been surveying in the US, UK, etc. Part of that was the clarity that it was going to be online. There was no, you might go, some universities are open, some are not. It was very clear here. So in that respect, that helped us. Looking forward, the biggest challenge now for us is, what's next? And it's begged some big discussions. The building I was just there in front of me, which of course, as I said, the wonders of technology is I can bring buildings back to and fro as I like. We've got to build another one across the street that's 10 stories high. Now the question is, what should we put in that building? Do we really need lecture theatres of 400 or 500 students? Already many Australian universities saying they're going to go to sort of 20-minute chunks. We're looking at satisfaction and many of our lectures having been online. And so I think this begs some bigger questions with us going forward in terms of where I can see as we exit out of this pandemic and rethinking what our delivery and what our the on-campus experience. So how do we make the face-to-face more engaging? Because let's be honest, a 400-seat lecture theatre for 2 hours wasn't probably the most engaging experience. And how do we reconfigure that?
That's so, I mean, picking up on that, maybe that last point there, and it is a question then I've got to all of you is, in one way then, is what we might term a traditional education, however we might define that actually, but your 3 or 4 years where you attend a university basically and do mostly face-to-face work and teaching. Is that something that you think therefore students won't have such an appetite for anymore? Do you think that might change therefore? Winnie?
I think that will not go away. It is still a preferred way of study for many young people. And I think it's also how many institutions are set up and are very successful in doing so. My guess is, and it will be something for the sector to think about, is traditionally we will think of full-time study, we value that particular qualification higher than people who actually have to do it part-time or for various reasons have to go back to their studies because of their learning style, because of their own circumstances. And it's something for the sector to start to think whether or not they will differentiate a traditional 3 or 4 years full-time degree versus, or signal to the wider sector or community out there, or the businesses and industries, that actually, if we do it part-time or however you stack your qualification, it's still okay, it's still as good as gold. And but you might not have the luxury to go through the social or the community or the university level, the sports facilities to enjoy or make lots of friends that you want to when you were young.
Do you think then? Oh, sorry, yeah, no, Perry, you.
Well, I suppose from my point of view is that having had a daughter locked down here for the last year, for final year for high school, year 12 here, was just the expression chomping at the bit does really not do justice to the speed at which she wanted to get out of here and get back to Australia. And she just started at the University of Newcastle this week. So the amount of, I got a WhatsApp today about the number of clubs that she's managed to join there, phenomenal. And the whole focus has been on getting back into a student experience. And I think as you come out of this lockdown, as a tourism academic, my suspicion is that travel is going to roar, providing people are allowed to travel and having those experiences. But my other daughter, interestingly, is at ANU in Canberra. At the moment, she's doing learning on her Indonesian online at the University of Indonesia, which has been funded through a New Colombo plan. So my hunch is that you're going to see students who are now more comfortable with online being quite happy to do that, whereas before it was face-to-face or nothing. And my suspicion is we're going to move into a much more of a hybrid environment where some students are going to say, look, I can do it in an internship internationally, do a virtual internship. That suits me. I'm not going to get on a plane. I'm not destroying the environment. Remember, there are other concerns here. Whereas other issues where I can be together with my friends, with the people I want to be, are going to be just as, dare I say, not even more important coming out of the pandemic. So my suspicion is not going to be an either or. I think we're going to see some interesting hybrid models coming forward out of this.
Yeah, thanks very much, Perry. Nigel?
Yeah, I think, I sort of agree with both Perry and Winnie on this one. I think what crises tend to do is they accelerate trends that were already there. And we, you can think about, innovations like radar and jet engines, accelerated by conflict. I think I don't think we're going to see, there was no trend towards the end of 4-year degrees. That wasn't a trend that was ever established. I think the trend that was established was a move to more flipped classroom, where a number of universities were moving more to providing content online and using face-to-face learning in a much more interactive way, where students were kind of debating the content and so on. And I think what this change will do, as Perry says rightly, people have become much more comfortable with working online, and it will make that acceleration towards flipped classroom. And I think most universities are reconsidering, do we really need to make a further investment in large lecture theatres? If we're going to, but I can think, I remember visiting Groningen University 20 years ago, where they'd already taken the decision to abandon large lectures and just move to small classroom teaching. So they were in the vanguard, I think. So I suspect what we'll see is much more intensive use of blended learning, blended delivery, but not to support online or part-time, but to actually support the move to more student-centered learning.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think one of the things that occurred to me, particularly when Perry was speaking earlier, and also with, I guess, your other hat on in terms of your director's hat, is that either the connections into associations, or more specifically, the connections into business and industry. You know, many of our universities, and certainly the ones that we have here today, including my own, you know, have strong partnerships with various businesses, you know, regionally, locally, nationally, and internationally. And do you think that is something that, particularly at the time and the challenge that we've had over the last little while, do you think that's something that has deepened, or as something that, you know, we realize that we might want to develop that in a slightly different way in the future? I'm also finally thinking of what we have in the UK in terms of our apprenticeships scheme, you know, and the opportunity for students to do a degree apprenticeship where, you know, you have your degree paid for, and at the end of it, you go into a guaranteed graduate level, you know, job with a very good company. So why wouldn't you do that? But do you think there are also other sort of partnerships, maybe more innovative or even bolder types of collaborations or partnerships that institutions might have with business and industry as well?
Oh, look, wearing my accreditation hat.
And you changed your background as well.
I just said that's the wonderful thing
On
about
it.
technology, you see. The ICE accreditation is, you know, for tourism and hospitality programs, which have always had a component of practical and applied skill within them. And that's been a model that has been there ever since the programs were started. So it's very implicit in that form of education. Looking at it across more broadly, I do believe that other degrees are now beginning to see that, and, you know, traditional economics degrees never had that. As that became business, they did put it in, and I think we're seeing more and more of that. And Malaysia more recently came up with what's called 2U, 2I, 2 years at university, 2 years in industry. And my hunch is that you know, one of the challenges of coming out of this will be the economic situation and the type of skills that students and companies are going to be expecting students to have. Now, a lot of this before was we were talking very much about high tech and high touch. And the challenge here is going to be that we've seen so much business go online, but how do we not miss those connection issues? And that's just not just going to be an issue for education, it's an education for the tourism industry, trying to work out again, what is it that people will value going forward from that? So my hunch is that as we grow out of this, and you're now going to get some really big companies coming out of this, you can just see what's happening with Amazon, etc. There's going to have to be a bit of a rethink. I think apprenticeship schemes, particularly in the German, Austrian context, have been there a lot longer. They've got a much deeper history in the organizations there. Whether the more short-termist model that you have of more stock market driven companies will be there, I don't know. But I suspect as we come out of this pandemic, and you're reading it already, so many companies are now realizing that they need to be long-term sustainable. The amount of car companies that have launched electric vehicles, I'm losing count at the moment. And not only that, they've all become technology companies overnight as well. They don't make cars anymore, they're a technology company because of how well Tesla's share price has done versus, say, Ford or General Motors. So what you're now seeing is those companies rethink themselves, and my hunch is they will hopefully realize that technology means they've got to have the brains, they've got to work with other organizations that have got the brains, and how can they pipeline students coming in. So I think we'll see a change beginning to come from that.
And I suppose if you think of the fact that the students, you know, employability is key for the students, and then you've got the employers with the attitudes that they have too, and what they want for their own workplace. You know, you have to be looking at that very carefully, don't you, as well? Sorry, Nigel.
Yeah.
Well, just going to, I mean, I obviously sort of agree with Perry. I think at the University of Limerick, we've always had this very strong emphasis on co-op education, where there's work-based learning. I think the trend, and this really isn't to do with the pandemic, but it's independent of the pandemic, but it was a well-entrenched sort of trend, is what we have in this particular part of the Midwest of Ireland is a lot of very high-tech multinationals because of the tax regime deliberately so because of the tax regime in this part of the country. And these are really all in artificial intelligence, medical equipment, data analytics, and so on. These partners are increasingly, rather than being accepting that we will educate the students and then just put them in the company for practical experience, they're becoming much more engaged in wanting to influence the curriculum and co-design the curriculum in a way that I think is relatively new. And we've got several new degrees that are being launched or have been launched in the very recent past that are co-designed and co-delivered with big software companies, because they recognize that the skill sets that they've got within those organizations are really at the cutting edge. And that, if they rely on us simply to deliver the curriculum, we're probably 5 years behind the leading edge companies. So that's been an interesting phenomenon that I think we probably will see gathering pace. I don't think it's been particularly impacted by the pandemic, although one of the things that really is interesting is we again looked at our numbers. Almost all our students who had placements have still got placements. The companies have been willing to take them virtually, where there's not provision for social distancing, and so we took that at first as a kind of suggestion that, well, they clearly value these students very highly. But they have been, I think, these companies, and this is to Perry's point, I think companies are operating much more flexibly now, so that there's all sorts of new possibilities for engagement, in the virtual space.
Do you think also, Nigel, on that, but actually to all colleagues, do you think now companies also therefore then are using this as an opportunity to develop their own workforce even more? So rather than, we're often talking here, aren't we, about new graduates, or graduates coming in and working in and being part of the company as well. But that upskilling of the workforce, so individuals you'll have in the workplace, wherefore then they can be doing a degree within the workplace and being part of the university as well. Do you think there's more of an opportunity to do that?
I just quickly come in and let Winnie and Perry respond. I think again a trend that was starting to become established before the pandemic and is getting quite a boost is the move towards micro-credentialing. I don't believe that will replace the traditional undergraduate bachelor's program. I think this is really at postgraduate level, but where people require to continually acquire new sets of skills, but they want it, rather than just going off and doing short courses, they want it kind of packaged in a formal way where they could perhaps assemble a master's degree over 3 or 4 years. And the reason I think that's got a big boost from the pandemic is in Ireland, the government has been putting quite a lot of funding into the university sector to kind of help people reskill and to absorb people who might otherwise be unemployed. So recent graduates who perhaps aren't getting jobs in the labour market at the present time coming back. So we've got a lot of extra funding for new graduates to come back into to university to do shorter courses that would be part of a micro-credential. I think that is a trend that was already established. And I think if I think back to when I was at Fiji National University, we had a project with the Indian government where we offered a whole raft of postgraduate specialist courses in IT, in things like mobile computing and cybersecurity and so on. So you had a student who's got an IT degree could then sort of gradually specialize and change direction by coming in and doing shorter courses of 3 months duration.
It's almost taking those short courses to that next level, isn't it? I think we'll come back to the detail around micro-credentials and how we might take that discussion forward. But Winnie, I didn't know if you wanted to comment as well on the last point, the last question, and particularly from, let's say, a Hong Kong perspective.
Can I take an Australian perspective?
You can take you can take a perspective of pretty much anywhere, Winnie. You need to have your background. I need to know where you are, because you could be anywhere. Yes.
It's
You
just
can take a
reminded me of
Newcastle,
the,
can't you, in Australia?
yes, given Perry's daughter at Newcastle as well. Just 2 points I want to pick up in terms of micro-credentialing and also large lecture rooms and apprenticeship in terms of creating new courses. University of Newcastle actually still is the university that actually students can finish a whole degree of Bachelor of Construction Management without ever stepping foot on campus because of the landmass of Australia. And so that was the ingenuity of the colleagues at the time. And when we have our new building in the city centre, we call it New Space. And anyone who visited it will realize that the conscious design is not to have a single lecture room. And we opened that building several years ago. So at the time, there was a big drive in the last 7 years to have blended learning, not because of COVID, but obviously COVID sort of make sure that the investment at the time will allow them to do things that they want to do. Micro-credentialing is an interesting one, and I don't know if we have time to explore later.
Yes, I think probably we should do that now.
Yeah, but I think all the conversation and discussions that we have heard, and I have heard in the last 10, 15 years, I think the challenge actually sits within the institutions, and it'll be interesting to hear the experience of Ireland and Malaysia as well, because the aspiration is there, but the mechanics of making sure that it can work. And actually, we appreciate that other institutions' courses or qualification is as good as ours.
Yeah.
Is an interesting one. And we've had thousands of MOOCs out there. So I'll just leave it right there because you might have other questions for us.
I think that's a terrific place. I'll come to Chris in a second. I think that's a terrific place to also put it, in terms of that, because to me as well, that really echoes a lot of the challenges we've had for so many years around transnational education and on recognition, doesn't it? So some of those challenges that we found as we developed different sort of transnational programs as well, I think are the ones that will emerge even more probably as we start to explore the opportunities around micro-credentials. Chris?
Yeah, sorry, I just we've had a couple of questions in the chat that I think are very much linked to the last couple of topics. I just wanted to put them in the mix. I'll sort of summarize, but we've had a question from Ishmael and a question from Olusola. They're talking really about how do we deal with sort of the lab-based or science-based curricula in the virtual teaching space. So where we're moving through flexible patterns and pathways of learning, and that's fantastic and it adds value. But how do we, do we have any experience on the panel in terms of addressing, conceptualizing this sort of a problem, and how something that is very physical, how it's being addressed? Because obviously it's an element of micro-credentialing, but it's also a very physical element of reality. So that was sort of a couple of questions we just had. I thought that things quite nicely.
Yeah, that connects in nicely. Colleagues?
So I think Chris and Ishmael, thanks for the question. That is the biggest challenge, is in lab-based subjects that are it's not just lab-based subjects. I mean, it's things like performing arts, dance, things
Sport.
that where you've got the need. I mean, it's a bit like you can't learn to swim online, so. I think that is the biggest challenge for us. We have, I think, seen universities in the areas of medicine and nursing experimenting with virtual reality, with things like operations that you can do in a kind of virtual reality environment. I think we're at a relatively early stage of that. One of the things that is being explored in the island of Ireland is whether we could, given the setup costs of a virtual reality are quite high, looking at consortia of universities that might work together to innovate in this space. But I think we're at a fairly early stage. I've certainly seen it in, I have seen in medical schools an element of this, but I still think there's a kind of a general feeling, and this would be, you talked about partnerships with key bodies. I think the professional bodies are actually relatively conservative in this space. So we've had to work very closely with the accrediting bodies and the professional bodies in areas like nursing, midwifery, dentistry, medicine, because they require so much face-to-face examination.
Yeah, and I suppose that's always going to be a challenge from that point of view, isn't there? I can see the colleagues nodding too. Winnie?
Yeah.
Just on Nigel's point about sharing resources or working in consortiums, I noticed actually in our audience, we have an expert on nursing and midwifery, and she was one of our trailblazers at Newcastle when we introduced virtual reality. And she's now the president of Tonghua College that has a lot of programs in nursing and midwifery, so might be good to connect afterwards.
Yes.
But in terms of even teaching anatomy, having virtual reality works, but you do need to put in a lot of resources and investment. And I was just looking at the good example. I think at the moment a lot of people talk about Arizona State University, and they're everywhere at the moment, talk about online. And I was reading the interview of the president on FT lately. He has done it for the last 18 years. I mean, we have quite a lot to catch up, but the good news is we have a really good innovative universities that won awards for the last 6 years that we can look to reference with. So, but obviously everyone's starting point is slightly different. So
I suppose what does also strike me with the panel we've got to and the experience we've got here, and we're going to probably just got maybe another question or two, and then I'm going to come back to you for your 3 sentences. But we're part, aren't we, of education systems very often supported by our governments that really do enable us to do things, in a more innovative way. We do work closely with business and industry. And I suppose if there are ever countries and areas where we could make this work, then I would think it is within some of the ones that we've got here. I know, speaking obviously from the UK perspective, I certainly believe that. But Nigel, I think, also said the word that we haven't talked about very much before, and might be an opportunity for us to deal with some of those challenges around the recognition of micro-credentials and potentially a pick and mix from different institutions, and that's consortia. There's a plethora of consortia, aren't there? Some of them are quite small, some of them are massive. A lot of them, again, we've got ones in the UK, like Worldwide Universities Network, or, Universitas 21, ones where you've got between, let's say, 20 and 30 institutions. Are those ones where potentially, there could be more opportunity there to get something, if not a pilot, but something initially up and running with regard to micro-credentials? I don't know, what are panel members' views on consortia in this space?
Well, if I might, I think that's already started. I mean, you're seeing, for example, with virtual exchange, you've got the virtual exchange program network. There's about 8 universities, mainly interested in a lot of Dutch and Australian in that one. You've got other networks like Aurora, which are a consortium of different universities, as well as, so these tend to be international ones rather than just national ones. And then you've got accreditation bodies like the ICE in hospitality and tourism, or AACSB in business. And so when you've suddenly got some form of platform, or it's a professional body like engineers or nursing or whatever, I think you're going to start seeing more go forward of this, because as you're looking, as Nigel was pointing out, saying, there are huge costs of doing this. Now, sometimes it's business that's ahead. There are already people who are performing operations around the world. The doctors might be sitting in India and the patients in America, whatever. That's already happening. We know that's happening. How do we bring our students up to speed with that kind of technology? And most universities often don't have that huge amount of resources to put into that. So between them, I think universities can be well placed. The problem is there's 26,000 universities on the planet. We're all vying to be the top 100. I haven't yet met a university that hasn't got aspirations to be in there. There's a simple reality about how some of this is going to shake down, which is not just about economics. The reality is there is no other product category that I can really think of that's like that. So where you've got governments, as you pointed out, restricting things, the way around that has been what airlines have done, which is Star Alliance, One World, etc. So my hunch is that the time has come. Now, those alliances have been around for a while, but to be honest, it's not really been much of an interest in some universities to do that. The time is now coming that as resources will become more tight and as the cost of this technology becomes more expensive, back to my earlier point about why every car company wants to become a technology company now, they need to raise the money. And they've got to do that to get to the stock market. They have to reinvent themselves as a technology company. Universities are going to have to go down this route as well. Otherwise, we're going to get very badly left behind. And so whilst micro-credentials, to make that point, might be an opportunity for universities, there could be an enormous threat because industry and business will be offering them and we're just not going to be able to get in the game. So I think, you know, these things often in life are a double-edged sword. And this is an important time for many people in institutions to have a really deep think about where this is going to go and as we unfold out of this pandemic.
That's a very good point, Perry. And of course, we do know that universities and businesses rather have already started to establish themselves as educational institutions. Chris?
Yeah, sorry, again, we just had an interesting question from Dilip about which very much links to this. And it's saying that considering the present situation, should the government bring necessary changes in standards of licensure or accreditation? So we've talked about the role of HE, we've talked about the role of business. Do panelists have any thoughts about the role of ministries or governments in terms of how we formally recognize and accredit? We know many countries have very recently actually fully recognized online degrees, but how will this maybe continue in the space moving forwards? Thank you.
Can I just sort of, thanks for that question, Dilip. I mean, I think Perry made the interesting point that, you know, you can do this in two different ways. I mean, you can either have a kind of a national or an international accreditation system that forces mutual recognition so that you make the credits portable, or you can privatize that and do it as a consortium. I think in some parts of the world, you know, we are moving very much towards the kind of the national, the regional. So of course, you know, if we think about within the EU and the European higher education space, the Bologna agreement now is 20 years old, and that whole vision was to create a common higher education area with portable qualifications where you could move around. Rather sadly, the UK has kind of shot itself in the foot by pulling out of the EU, and now its qualifications are not recognised anywhere else in the EU automatically, whereas for the rest of us, we're still in that rather nice space. And what the EU is currently doing is a big drive to create it's the European Universities Initiative, and so there's a lot of funding to help build the consortia. We're an organization called YREN, which is the Young European Research Universities Network, to kind of build that portability within the framework of Bologna. So I think there are some parts of the world that are pretty far advanced with this already, and we're going back to it. This is a well-established trend that will probably accelerate as Perry rightly says. The cost of trying to provide everything to everyone becomes too high. So, you know, if you've got within the network particular expertise that can provide this part, I mean, I think about doctoral training networks, consortia, you know, that I've been involved in the past. We don't all need to be experts in you know, ethnography or qualitative research methodology. As long as one of the partners has got that expertise to put into the mix, then that works. But you've got to, I mean, I think for a good partnership to work, everybody's got to benefit. Everybody's got to have something to contribute, and everyone's got to benefit, which I think is a point Perry made. Yeah,
very much so. And I think also, as you were referencing earlier on with the developments you've had in the past, you know, the importance of the support of governments, of support of your national and potentially your local governments there. And I suppose that is one of the things that they're trying to do, particularly with the European Universities Initiative, isn't it? It is bringing together all players in the game. It's not just the universities or colleges, it's also looking at the quality assurance agencies. It's also looking at those local governments as well. I think we did quite well, I did quite well as being in the UK to get to 49 minutes. And that's the first time anybody's mentioned us, even the European Union. But I was going to ask that myself anyway, because I feel as though there is going to be something of an impact in terms of Brexit. But I suppose, though, just what it does highlight is the vital importance of everybody in the game, be you a university, be you a business, be you a government as well. And as Nigel has just said, the importance of there being something that is mutually beneficial for everybody within that process. And I guess that actually, though, is also at the heart of partnership working, isn't it? You don't mind, there's sometimes a little bit of an imbalance. If you've got a very deep strategic partnerships, there will always be some bits that supports one more than the other at certain points. But it needs to balance out, doesn't it? It needs to be something that's mutually beneficial there. Have we got any other questions from the floor, Chris?
So we had a question about managing virtual assessment models, which I think is interesting but relatively tricky. And then another question about specifically from South Korea, from Winnie Lee, which is talking about the massive change universities have gone through in order to have to justify their relevance, even on a departmental level. And so thinking, the panelists, what's a good way for universities to position themselves to make changes more efficiently and effectively? And this is obviously relating to consortia, relating to partnership, it's relating to sort of relevance, but particularly maybe linking back to the previous question about subjects that are more face-to-face or subjects that are, differently positioned in the online world. And I guess is there a mad scramble, or are we looking to align ourselves so we end up with, pharmaceutical, medical, music, so we're cramming everything together to try and remain relevant. So those are the two remaining questions that we have really about positionality and then virtual assessment.
Any colleagues want to pick up one or both of those?
This was really struck by the question from Eugene around pharmaceutical music, and I do think this is again a trend that may be accelerated a little bit because of, I think, with the in the kind of more online environment, you're breaking down boundaries more easily. What I think we're seeing in getting demand from employers is for people who are more creative and more flexible, more able to kind of move across boundaries. And I think the traditional organizational structure of a university is quite antithetical to that kind of boundary hopping or boundary spanning. I do get a sense that we've seen some curriculum developments taking place in the last 12 months that have been bridging particularly business subjects like accounting and economics with AI, with data analytics, with mathematics, and I think that because that's more possible in a virtual environment, we are starting to see that being more actively explored. And so we have seen some interesting curriculum developments taking place that I think when people were were in physical buildings separated by hundreds of meters of green space from another faculty or another department, one of the kind of paradoxes is that the current environment has actually allowed greater flexibility and people to think more creatively. And it is fairly clear that what we're seeing increasingly is that overlap particularly between biology, mechanics, artificial intelligence, data analytics. It's changed, and I think we've not been well suited, well prepared to kind of adjust to that, and it may be that we are in a better space now.
All right, everything just froze there for a moment.
Yeah, you're fine. We can see and hear you.
Yeah, fine.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, no, everybody froze from me in a second. for a second. So sorry, so I missed the end of that, Nigel. Apologies. Now
it was brilliant. Let me tell you, it was brilliant.
It was. I'm sure it was the best thing the whole time I've known you. I missed that final sentence. Typical. I'm now going to. I'm going to give Nigel the time to have a little bit of a breather anyway. But I'm going to come to probably Perry first, then Winnie, and then Nigel for their maximum 3 sentences, and not with lots of hyphens and semicolons and commas and things either. I've tried that one before, and Mandy always tells me off. Maximum of 3 sentences to say what they think the future of higher education will look like. Perry.
All right, I'm going to go with a news flash.
Oh, yeah.
First is that we're going to move from analog professors to digital professors. The professor which has been stuck on his classroom with his books in a lecture theatre is now going to become much more digital, just like we are tonight. Second, I think, is we're going to see the shift from global mobility to global learning. So it's not just about moving a fairly small percentage of students. I admire Nigel being able to get to the numbers here, but that's unusual. Most universities get excited when they get to 10%. There's in UK universities, they've got mobility. We need to shift our thinking from global mobility to global learning, and again, using technology to do that. And the third bit of this will be how we will use collaborative models going forward to take the university out of just being the university in a building in a town, and to see how we can network ourselves. So those are my 3.
Terrific, Perry. And I apologise now, colleagues, because you won't have anything like that in the background. So the moral of the story is never go after Perry in any form of platform or conference ever.
I'm just going to go back to my blue sky thinking.
Yes,
I feel very hard done by with your background.
I know, it's not right, is it? We need to get better backgrounds. My picture's not changed at all.
I only have 2 sentences. I think the future of higher education will look more or less like what it is that we know of today. Technology, however, would definitely have a more prominent role in enabling access and providing learning analytics.
Thank you very much, Winnie. And Nigel?
I think I'd sort of echo a little bit what Winnie says. I think there's a danger that we have in the past looked at the internet and online education and thought that that would transform the world that we live in. I think that the MOOCs 10 years ago were kind of presaged as being, a kind of, I think it was an avalanche is coming, was this breathless title of a research report. And the reality was that on-campus enrollments have just continued to rise relentlessly. I mean, we had back in 1980, 50 million students. We've currently got 250 million students. We're still at only 35% or 37% participation rate globally. And in the advanced countries, it's probably 60, 70%. So there's still quite a way to go. I think that clearly the trend that was already well established is that more and more education is relying on a kind of blended format. That will continue. But I think it would be foolish to kind of think that we're at a kind of a sudden pivot point. I think the trajectory it will be changed somewhat, because we're much more comfortable with online education and we can see some of the benefits of that. But I think the reasons people go to university fundamentally will stay the same.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, colleagues. I just a final couple of words from me, really. Then, and I think, like you say, I think our timeline may have shifted. We're all operating in very different circumstances, but who we are and what we do is very much really at our hearts, and our values have remained the same. But for me, on reflecting, I think it really is partnership and cooperation and collaboration that, ironically, I think I've learned more about sitting in this little room for the last year, pretty much. They let me out occasionally. But there's been a lot more, I think, because of the situation we've been in some ways than there had been before. So I think that for universities, be it university business, government, individuals, groups, I think that we've got a lot to build on success-wise in the last 12 months. And I think if we work together to build on it, then we can shape, a really strong higher education platform for the future. So I just do finally then want to thank colleagues very much. Fantastic panel. What some wonderful discussion taking place there. Thanks very much to Chris for bringing in the various questions as well, and thanks to the audience for taking part. And I really hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did, and I certainly learned a great deal too. So thank you to everyone. And now I'll pass back to Mandy.
Thank you, Judy. Let me share the screen. Right, thank you everyone for the very insightful and fantastic discussions. I'd like to express my deep appreciation to our wonderful speakers and moderator for their time and contribution, and also thank you, our participants, for joining us for this AppliedHE Exchange. This is the first exchange of the year, and while this marks the end of this particular webinar, with many more events lined up in the months to come, we have a regular series of webinars. The first one is called Squaring the Circle Debate, and the first episode is on the 3rd of March with a very controversial topic. The AppliedHE Rankometer is a welcome addition to the global ranking landscape. And for those who didn't attend the Rankometer launch last month on the 27th of January, Rankometer is a new ranking based on one single and transparent benchmark. While I'm obviously in favor of the motion, we also welcome the opponents to what we hope will be a spirited and lively debate. So if you want to express an opinion or make a comment on rankings, please join us at our Season 2, Episode 1 of the Squaring the Circle debate on the 3rd of March, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Singapore time. And if you haven't checked the results, please do so at this link here, appliedhe.com/rankometer. We are planning to launch another innovative ranking sometime towards the 3rd quarter of this year, so please watch this space. We also have another regular series of webinar called Fireside Chat, and the first episode of Season 2 is on the 7th of April with the theme Decoupling Research Impact and Education Excellence Within Universities for Better Outcomes. Again, to reiterate, for this year, we will have a webinar every first Wednesday of the month, with Squaring the Circle debate and Fireside Chat alternating every other month, all the way to December of 2021. Always on a Wednesday evening, always at 8 p.m. Singapore time. So do keep your monthly first Wednesday nights free. And last month was a busy month for us. In addition to launching Rankometer, we also launched Future, the world's first professional social media platform for the higher education sector. Future aims to connect everyone from high school to professional career to lifelong learning for the 3 E's: education, employment, and everything in between. Future is designed for higher education leaders who want to stay informed about the latest developments, events, and webinars in the sector. It also allows you to set up pages about topics that are relevant to you, discuss, comment, post news and events, and much more. And in phase 2, we will be reaching out to students, alumni, and employers for internships, scholarships, research collaboration, and lifelong learning. So in short, eventually Future will encompass the entire higher education and career experience from leaving high school to retirement. So please sign up for Future and encourage your friends and peers to sign up too. It is the only social media you'll ever need. I've been mentioning this at every webinar that we've organized, and that is, we can promote your institution's news to your global target audience. So please send us your extraordinary news and press releases. It's a complimentary service from AppliedHE, so please do take advantage of it. And I'm pleased to say, AppliedHE now has 3 rating systems. They serve as benchmarks and marketing tools to your institution's quest for global branding and excellence. We have the all-round job-ready rating system to evaluate the quality of teaching and learning and employability of your graduates. An English-ready rating to evaluate the quality of English language instruction in non-English speaking countries. It is also a great marketing tool for the recruitment of international students. And the online-ready rating, which helps your institution benchmark and promote its online programs and courses. So do reach out to us if you would like to learn more about how these tools can translate into affordable strategies for global branding and marketing for your institution. And last but not least, as you know, we are the new kid on the block. We still am, and we're very grateful for all the support that we can get, which is why I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all our very supportive webinar partners: City University of Hong Kong, Airlangga University of Indonesia, Hasanuddin University of Indonesia, Changchun Christian University of Taiwan, Kirk University of Thailand, the University of Lahore of Pakistan, Chinese Cultural University of Taiwan, Pearl Academy of India, JL Education Consultants, and Education Insight UK. A big thank you for the valuable support given to AppliedHE. Right, thanks very much, everyone. However, the evening's not over yet. Please do not leave the chat room. We want you to experience a networking atmosphere that is as creative and as close as we can get to a physical networking environment. We're going to open the room now for a few minutes so you can all see each other, say hello, introduce yourself. So please turn on your cameras, we play some music, have a drink, relax. The room is all yours. Over to you now, Peter, to get our social event started.
Oh, hello. Let me just try and turn on the music. And wait.
Very good evening.
Hi, how are you? So
see you.
Use the order from the screen itself, right? So Marcus from Colleges of Technology, Abu Dhabi, UAE. Very glad being with you today. I really enjoyed the session. I asked you questions, got few responses. You remained unanswered, but there is plenty of time with your world to work on it. I'm expecting new events very soon.
Hi, hello. I'm Sally Chan. I'm the president of Tonghua College. In the past, I worked in University of Newcastle, Australia, and also University of Newcastle, Singapore campus. Yeah, nice to meet all of you again. Yeah, really enjoyed the discussion. A lot of insight. So thank you so much, Mandy.
Are you still based in Singapore?
Yeah. Now I relocate to Hong Kong. Yeah, and take up a new position at Tonghua College as the president.
Great to know.
Well, we've heard a lot about you already, Sally. So
thank you. Thanks to Winnie.
Congratulations on your role as well. That's terrific.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so hope we can have a collaboration in the future. Yeah, between the college and and everyone.
Absolutely, yes. That's a great thing with this environment. Look at all of the different people that here are all from different countries and different backgrounds and different times of the day. Well done to those of you that are still awake in Malaysia and Singapore and doing well. You have no excuse here in the UK.
Yeah, you have to get up very early.
And this is true. That is true.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the session tonight. Hi, Dilip. Oh, wow. Good to see you. You're muted, Dilip. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
It has been voted as a quote of the year. Unmute yourself.
Yes.
That is right.
Dilip, unmute yourself. Right. So finally.
I forgot to unmute myself.
Exactly.
I think we all know that.
So it is a great session. So I must congratulate all the teams of AppliedHE and all panelists. And how is I find that everything is fine and going well, because time is coming. We have to look forward. We have to be positive, and our students are waiting. So we have to give them motivation. We have to give them, inspiring them that to come back to the campus, and gradually other things will resume. And it is so nice to see everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much. Perhaps on that note, we can close off the evening. Did anybody want to say hello,
so.
who you are?
Yeah.
If not, then we'll just leave it at
Thank
that.
you. Thank you very
Happy
much,
New
everyone.
Year.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you very much.
Bye.